time for another Q&A. Sorry I'm late, guys. Next week we'll be back to normal schedule. So starting off with how to fix sleep while working evening/shift work. So this one is really difficult because you weren't meant to do this. You were not meant to work through the night, especially most likely under heavy artificial lighting, whatever the job may be. I can't really think of a job that wouldn't involve heavy artificial lighting when working in the evening. And so you're going to be like, your circadian rhythm is going to be really messed up. And it's probably one of the most important things for our health is circadian rhythm. You are a being of light. And without that proper light exposure, with regards to timing as well, there's going to be a lot of situations where it's going to be really difficult to mask these problems, if you will, because you don't really want to be taking melatonin coming off of an evening shift and messing things up and whatnot. You could be doing things like theanine or even GABA just to help calm down, your excitatory hormones, things like ashwagandha maybe to help balance cortisol levels, or rhodelia. Like, there's a lot of adaptogens you could look into to help calm down that cortisol. You want to drive it down in the evening. Usually theanine works pretty well for that. And it just depends, right? Because evening could be midnight or it could be 2 a.m. Like, it just depends on that person's work schedule. But trying to abide by circadian rhythms as much as humanly possible away from it. So darkening out your environment as much as you absolutely can. No LED lights, not even a peak of sunlight coming through, because you're most likely going to be sleeping past sunrise and everything. But then when you get up, make sure you are 100% getting sunlight. Don't flicker on your bathroom light. Don't turn on your phone. None of those things. Get outside, put your bare feet in the grass and get sunlight immediately. Try to really begin building these hormones and this mitochondrial function the best you can to your ability. Now, away from that, there are a lot of things you could look into, but then it gets very nuanced at that point. And I had to be very careful of what I recommend, because without having a lot of information. But when you're working an evening shift as well, or a night shift, I used to work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Hated it. Horrible for your health. You should never do that. Such is life, though. You don't want to eat during those times. Now, granted, if you have a very physically demanding job, that is understandable. You're probably going to need some sustenance. You could look at ketones. I like Ketone IQ, and that could help, pull you through. But once again, if it's very physically demanding, then you're probably going to need to eat some food. But if it's like moderate or even low, sitting in a chair kind of idea, then you could look at just taking 1 or 2 ketone shots throughout the night just to keep that energy up and that cognitive performance going. But you don't want to eat during these times, because you're not really going through those digestive processes. Now, the body obviously will. It's not going to just think, hey, no, I'm not going to do this. But it's like, yo, we're supposed to be sleeping right now. I don't know what's happening. So the body's extremely confused. These clock genes are significantly out of sync. So you want to try to do your best to get them in sync. And so I wish I could provide more on that, but reality is, try not to eat during your shift. Use ketones if you need to. And then coming off of your shift, just make sure your environment is completely dark as possible. And you could look at things like theanine to help bring down cortisol levels, and then make sure you are getting sunlight the moment you wake up. No excuses, no nothing. Obviously, if you have to pee, whatever, go in the dark, but then make sure that your first exposure to light is sunlight. And remember, you have to at least open a window. Now, you want to be physically outside with the bare feet touching the grass. That's going to be your best bet. But if you don't have a choice, like, for example, when I was in a condo, I would go on the balcony and try to get that first exposure right away. Now, granted, I was always up before sunrise, so I would just get outside right away, but you can't get it through the glass. So it's not as, you can't just open the blinds. Like, you have to get the physical sunlight on your skin through, being outside. But once again, a window is worst case scenario by opening that window. And so it's just kind of one of those things that, such as our society today, and this is another reason why we see disease on the rise, is because we have these types of professions. I'm sure they've had them for many years, but anyways, it's just, they're not healthy for you working these evening shifts. So, focus on your health and then maybe get away from evening shifts, but just don't eat, use ketones, try to really reduce cortisol when you get off, and make sure your environment is completely pitch black, and your absolute first exposure to light must be sunlight. So I hope that helps. Just being diagnosed with fatty liver. What are the best ways to reverse this and heal my liver? So this is obviously going to be very contextual, but because there's definitely something underlying, like environmental changes need to be had, things like this. So when we look at fatty liver, one of the best tools to begin with, I hate to say this, I hate just saying supplements, but TUDCA. TUDCA. TUDCA does a wonderful job for helping the liver heal, lessens protein misfolding, helps with bile production, softening gallstones, all sorts of things to improve liver function. So TUDCA is a really good one to begin with. And once again, just like the previous question, I wish I could provide more, but it gets very very contextual, sorry, very nuanced, depends what the person is experiencing. Now, when we look at liver problems, there's a lot to do with potential mold and parasites. And so like addressing mold and parasites can be a big one. Looking into bioregulators like sphetonorm and pileotax. And so sphetonorm is for the liver, pileotax for the kidneys. Now, usually the kidneys and liver, they have a crosstalk, so they go hand in hand. So if you have a kidney problem, you have a liver problem, vice versa. So sphetonorm and pileotax can be really great for helping with liver damage or problems like fatty liver. BPC, believe it or not. Now, this would have to be injectable. No, I should say have to be injectable, but injectable is definitely going to be more efficacious when it comes to healing the liver. But BPC can be a really wonderful peptide for helping the liver. There are a lot of modalities that you could do. You don't want to do a detox, right? Like you got to fix all the other underlying stuff first before you try to detox and everything. But I do apologize. I wish I could provide more, but TUDCA, sphetonorm, pileotax, and then like something like BPC could be a great place to start while addressing your environment and maybe nutrition and obviously infections and things like that. Because as mentioned, things like mold and parasites can be big culprits of liver and kidney problems. So kind of start there, and that could be a great place because maybe that stuff alone can just be very beneficial for you and, make you satisfied with what you're experiencing. What's the what's the cause reason someone gets polyps in the gallbladder? 22-year-old female. So there are many reasons a female can. Females tend to have much larger gallbladder issues because of estrogen. So estrogen slows down bile flow. It affects the sphincter. It's called the sphincter of Oddi, where the bile squirts into the small intestine. So estrogen can really impact that sphincter. And then estrogen will also impact thyroid. Then that further impacts that sphincter. So just the hormones in general can have a big impact on gallbladder health. Now, when we look at polyps, there's a lot of research showing things like polyps and tumors and whatnot, and cysts and everything are ways of the body actually containing something, whether it's containing a toxin or a pathogen or whichever it may be. Like they see now when they're cutting open tumors, they're finding parasites and mold and bacteria. They're finding so many things within these tumors. And the same goes for these polyps. There's probably something in that general region and the body is just trying to contain it. And so that's why you'll hear some people say that polyps are actually like okay, that they're good for you, which I think once again that's very nuanced, contextual. But what I think they're implying is that it's containing something so it doesn't get out further and get worse, kind of idea. So not that they're good for you, they're just kind of containing something, but that's still a signal. It's like, oh, don't go, oh, okay, well, this person tells me that having polyps is okay because it's containing something. Well, no, you still got to address it, right? And so when we look at this, as mentioned, it could just be sluggish bile and toxin buildup because the bile is what helps you detoxify. The liver is going to make these toxins more water soluble, where the bile is going to grab onto them so you can pass them through the feces. But there is the situation of the gallbladder becoming very stagnant. And so then these toxins become overburdening and polyps could develop. But then there's also things like parasites and mold. So mold will slow it down, and parasites, they crawl up in there because they feed off of your toxins and your heavy metals and things like this. And so then it could be your body trying to contain parasites in that region. So once again, it's extremely contextual and it's a very broad spectrum thing, but TUDCA is a place to start, try to get some of that moving. And I should say, as per the last person's question as well with the fatty liver, when you do TUDCA, you're probably going to want very large dosages in regards to fatty liver. And so you're probably gonna want to get up to 2,000 milligrams a day. So you can do 1,000 milligrams twice a day. But especially as a female, you don't want to just start there because, as mentioned, it thins the bile and gets things moving. So if all of a sudden you start, like you break open this dam, these floodgates open and all these toxins come rushing out, like you're going to feel pretty awful. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're slowly working that dosage up, just starting with like 250 milligrams. And then you can work out from there. And timing could be like, I like it before bed because the bile really helps clear things out of the small intestine. So when you're talking about small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, TUDCA can be very beneficial. Same with just ox bile in general. But you could also do it in the morning. Bile helps absorb fats and fat soluble vitamins. So you can do it with a meal, things like that. But in regards to the polyps, you could start with TUDCA, but then it's most likely addressing infections and actually balancing out that immune response, because you are losing the side of the immune system that will break these things down. So you're in this more proliferative state, like this constant proliferative state to build things up. So then we build these polyps and everything. You want this catabolic state of the immune response as long as you're not already like autoimmune. So once again, that's where it gets like super contextual, because you don't want to just start pushing more catabolism, but you're most likely imbalanced from Th1, which will break these things down. So balancing out the immune response, that one can be very tricky in a Q&A, because you have to be very careful, because I have no idea where your immune system's at. And if I make a recommendation for something, it could just make you a lot worse. So it gets very nuanced. Unfortunately, I can't provide a great answer, but I guess a great answer to what to do about them, which you never really asked. So you asked what's the cause slash reason. It's most likely toxins and infections in that area, and they're having trouble being excreted. And so your body could be developing polyps to contain those toxins and infections so they don't spread more throughout the body and cause more problems. Hopefully that answered after all that tangent. Nebulizing with hydrogen peroxide. Thoughts? So it can be a valuable tool. It definitely can act as an antimicrobial. And so when we look at that, it can do great for infections in the gut, obviously the lungs, because you're inhaling it. So it really helps break apart mucus as well. So anybody with like breathing difficulties and whatnot, hydrogen peroxide nebulization can be very beneficial there. You do have to worry about irritation. So you really want to make sure you're using food grade hydrogen peroxide and diluted with distilled water. And so like we're talking like 3% minimal hydrogen peroxide, like start minimal, and then you can eventually increase the amount of hydrogen peroxide you use. But remember, peroxide is an oxidant, like it creates oxidative stress. So you have to be able to get rid of that oxidative stress. So you'll see tons of people that will go say they tried hydrogen peroxide and it made them worse. Well, one, it probably caused a die-off that they couldn't deal with, and they probably didn't have enough antioxidant status to rid of the oxidative stress that the hydrogen peroxide caused. So like I would never start, like if we just met and we started working together, I would never start someone off with hydrogen peroxide, because they're in no way ready for that. Maybe like a micro dose or something like that they could be ready for, but it's just not something that I would utilize in the beginning. I would wait until we restored some antioxidant systems first, and then we could look at running the hydrogen peroxide. But it is a very valuable tool for fighting infections and whatnot. Very valuable there. And so it can be used under the right conditions as long as you have a healthy antioxidant status and able to clear the die off, meaning like the endotoxins and everything that are produced by the infections after they have been killed with this antimicrobial tool. So liver health, kidney health, adequate bowel movements, hydration, all those things. So yeah, hydrogen peroxide nebulizing can be a wonderful tool. You just definitely want to be in the right place in order to do that. And also too, you'll notice like I don't really have the answer for this, but you'll get white on your nails and everything. You'll start to see a lot of white in them and whatnot. Because I remember when I had an extremely severe case of sleep apnea, for those that don't know, I would stop breathing 71 times an hour and my oxygen level would drop to 75% at times. I remember the doctor was like, we have no idea how you're still alive, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what I do. But I was in a first aid course for when I went to the drilling rigs, and the woman was drinking hydrogen peroxide. And that's when I started getting into hydrogen peroxide, because talking about oxygenation and everything. Now, knowing what I know now, I'll never drink hydrogen peroxide. Not that there isn't a place for it, I'm sure there is, but it's just not something I would do. But that's initially how I got into hydrogen peroxide. So many, many moons ago, like I was 18 years old when I went to the drilling rigs, I believe. So I've used it for a long, long time. But once again, valuable tool. Just want to make sure that you are in a good position in order to do hydrogen peroxide, which most people are not. If they're considering nebulizing hydrogen peroxide, they're probably not in a great position to nebulize hydrogen peroxide. Okay, last one. What is one of the biggest tools you have used for your health? So I saw this and instantly was like CO2 therapy. So CO2 therapy was the most instant gratification thing I have ever experienced in my entire life. And I think every human being should do it. Obviously, disclaimer, educational purposes, you know the drill, but we are experiencing so much hypoxia in today's society. So our cells are being starved of oxygen, whether it's the EMFs in our environment, the blue light, parasites, and mold. Mold is probably one of the biggest causations, to my knowledge, that creates hypoxic environment. So just a severe lack of oxygen. Like when we see extreme constipation, we definitely know there's a lot of hypoxia within the gut. Like, yes, you got your vagal tone and all that kind of stuff. Huge, very, very important digestive capacity, but it's a lot to do with hypoxia. I mean, it could be hormones too, DHT, but we definitely tend to see hypoxia because the very first time that I did a longer session of CO2. Sorry for the TMI guys, but I couldn't make it through the session. I had to run to the bathroom, and the things that came out of me, it was just insane. Like I couldn't believe, and the colors and all sorts of stuff, because we just have so much hypoxia. So things build up in the gut. Because I've always said you could have bowel movements but still be constipated. A lot of things can get stuck up there. Like when I talked about colonics and how that woman had a Barbie doll head in there for like 6 years. So CO2 will really improve your ability to transport oxygen. So the Bohr effect, BOHR. I hope I spelled that right. The Bohr effect. That's why nasal breathing is so important. Nasal breathing is so important because of that Bohr effect. And so that just helps increase the CO2 levels. Now, I remember someone freaked out at me, like freaked out at me. I got like 6 or 7 messages all in caps locks implying that I'm an idiot because I shared a picture of my tank in my mask or whatever. And that's just severely uneducated. And I really hope they swallow their pride, because being like that is denying so many people healing. It's CO2 therapy is the most phenomenal thing I've ever done. And it's some of my clients will agree with me. I remember I went and helped a client with their CO2, and like they were a couple minutes into it and they slowly turned their head and they're like, what is this? I had another client that we got off of a call, and an hour later I got a text, I am so grateful for you, this is amazing. Like CO2, and obviously not everyone can experience that, because you do have to worry about the increase in oxygen also like stimulating a ton of physiological processes like immune function, detoxification. So you might almost feel worse when you do that, but that's part of the process. So it's not that it's bad for you, it's just actually your body doing what it was designed to do. But it's just the most phenomenal thing I've ever experienced, next to modafinil, but I'll talk about that another time. But this CO2 therapy is just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable what it's done for me and what it's done for clients. And just like I could wake up and let's say, I had a, not the greatest evening the night before. I didn't sleep well, I ate poorly, whatever it may be. I woke up with a headache, whatever, brain fog. After one 30-minute session of CO2 at 8%, which is beverage grade CO2, by the way, we are not putting our mouths around car exhaust like this person was implying that attacked me. And this is beverage grade, low percentage. You work your way up, but any sort of ailment that I had is completely gone after a 30-minute session of CO2 therapy. So I had this morning ritual. I think I posted it to my Instagram story one time where I got my red light therapy, I got my CO2 machine, I got my PMF mat, I got my frequency beats and everything, and I do that every single morning. And it's just the most amazing thing that I've ever done. I remember the first time I did it before a workout, and I didn't do it very long in a very small percentage because I started to get a headache. So you got to build up to these things, like you'll know. But I went into my workout and I was lifting like 30% heavier than I normally do, because I have been living in moldy environments most of my life. Just my luck. I think I finally found one that isn't. But so as mentioned, mold creates severe hypoxia. So anyways, I went into that workout. I was like lifting 30% heavier. And after the workout, I promise you, I worked very hard. I felt like I barely worked out. It was just the best recovery ever. And ever since then, it's just nothing but improvements day in and day out of using CO2 therapy. I think every human being should invest in CO2 therapy. It's just the most phenomenal thing. It's a little freaks you out a little bit when you first do it though, because you start huffing and puffing a lot, but it's just that movement of oxygen and everything. And it also widens the blood vessels and whatnot. So this is why, once again, you need to work your way up to it. Disclaimers, of course, but CO2 therapy is hands down one of the most instant gratification beneficial things I have ever done for my health. And it like the machine itself is a little pricey, but I think it's 1,000% worth the investment. It's $630 American with a discount code. But then you have to get CO2 tanks. So you can start with the soda stream. And when you start initially, you're going to be such low duration and percentage that it lasts quite a while. But at 8%, which is the max, that's all you want to do, 8%, that soda stream canister only lasts 25 minutes. So I have one of those I have 2 big 20-pound CO2 tanks. As mentioned, I shared it to my Instagram story one time. And I think I fill that every 3-4 weeks. I can't remember exactly. I don't really pay attention, but super beneficial. As mentioned, I think every human being should be doing that. And the person who attacked me, I really hope you swallow your pride and educate yourself, because it is such an extremely valuable healing tool. Like, as you can see, I'm very passionate about it because it would just blew my mind the moment I ever did it, the first moment I did it. And many, many other clients can attest that as well. So CO2 therapy, hands down my favorite. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And as mentioned, if you have any more questions, drop them in the comments there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.